Human beings just can't resist a mystery. It isn't enough just to be able to see, touch, smell, or taste something. We have to understand its story, including how and why it came to exist. That isn't always possible. And where there's no explanation, we're left with speculation and wonder. Life is full of little mysteries, but this video is all about big mysteries and strange places. Some of them have partial explanations, but others have no explanation at all. Even if it didn't have any mystical qualities, the five-flower lake of Jiuzhaigou National Park in southwest China would be considered a wonder. It's a place of breathtaking natural beauty set into a valley on the Tibetan Plateau. There are several waterfalls and lakes in the area, but none that compare to Five-Flower Lake. It's 16 feet deep, but the water is so clear you can see all the way to the bottom, and the water takes on different hues and shades depending on which vantage point you gaze upon it from. From one side it's yellow, from another it's a rich shade of green, and then sapphire blue and even dark jade. The real mystery, though, is why it never freezes. Even in the deepest depths of winter, when everything around it freezes solid, the water in the lake still runs. Because of that, some of the local residents consider it to be a holy place. There's probably a simple explanation, which is that there's an underwater hot spring preventing the lake from getting cold enough to freeze, but the science only serves to get in the way of the story. There are two different names for this abandoned ranch in Utah, USA. Both of them are foreboding. One of them is Hell Ranch, and the other is Skinwalker Ranch. We don't know how it got those names, but we do know that it's a place so scary that hardened cattle rancher Terry Sherman sold it in 1996 after spending only 18 months there because his family could no longer cope with the strange, seemingly supernatural goings-on that were happening all around him. Crop circles frequently appear on the land, UFO sightings occur regularly, and Terry is adamant that several of his cattle were inexplicably mutilated in the middle of the night with surgical precision. He also swears that a wolf 3 times the size of any wolf he'd ever seen once approached his front door and was unharmed after being shot 3 times at point-blank range. A small tourist industry is now built up around the ranch, so we should probably take at least some of the tales with a grain of salt. If you head to the forests of Kameny Silo in Ukraine, you come across some enormous boulders that appear to have no business being in the middle of woodland. There are 2 schools of thought as to how they got there, and both of them involve glaciers. One possibility is that an enormous glacier carried the boulders to the area, then melted away, leaving the rock stranded. The other is that the boulders were once at the feet of the mountains that used to stand here, but were weathered away by the arrival of a glacier that since disappeared. The local people choose not to believe either version, though. They tell a story about a village of wealthy people that once existed here. It's said that an old man once passed through the village seeking shelter and food, but was turned away by the residents. The old man was actually an angel sent to Earth to test the goodwill of the residents. Having found none, he took vengeance by turning the entire village to stone. He even left his footprints in one of the boulders as sort of a signature, and the footprints can still be seen today. You don't need to know much about science to understand that rocks and boulders aren't alive. As they aren't alive, they shouldn't be able to grow. And yet the Travans of Costas Testi in Wallachia, Romania appear to grow a little with each passing year. The rocks are actually a sandstone concretion capable of secreting cement. Their cores are made of stone, but their outer shells are made of sandstone. When the rain comes down heavily, new secretions appear on the outer shells of the rocks and help them grow. Since 2004, the growing stones have been collected together in one location known as Travans Museum Natural Reserve, both to study the phenomenon more closely and also to protect and preserve them. Unsurprisingly, many of the local people who live around the stones have been aware of them for generations and believe the rocks are alive and treat them as supernatural objects. Science may have given them a better explanation, but even now, very few of them choose to believe it. It takes a leap of faith to believe that objects in the Museum of the Holy Souls in Purgatory in Rome, Italy are genuine, but plenty of people do. The small museum can be found at the back of the Chiesa de Sacro Cuore del Suffragio and consists of a collection of Bibles, clothes, prayer books, and even tabletops said to have been burned by the handprints of souls in limbo. According to Catholic beliefs, the souls of those living in purgatory can have their passage to heaven accelerated by the prayers of those still on earth. So the scorch marks were caused by those trapped in the afterlife, urging their friends and loved ones to pray harder for their salvation. The museum was built by Victor Jouet, a French missionary who claims that after a fire destroyed part of the church, it left behind the image of a face on the wall, which he interpreted as that of a trapped soul begging for freedom. How the handprints then turned up on so many of the objects inside his church has never been explained. Having already seen that boulders can seemingly grow in this video, you're about to see another seemingly impossible phenomenon, a mountainous sand dune that can sing. You'll find it in Altan Emel, a national park in the country of Kazakhstan. The light-colored sand dune is enormous. It runs on for almost 2 miles and is nearly 500 feet tall at its highest points. When the sands are at their driest, the entire structure emits a low hum, compared by some to the sound of a plane engine, but others say it sounds like a church organ. Even though the area is often whipped by high winds, the sand dune has remained in place for thousands of years, apparently exempt to the laws of physics. The source of the sound is the friction of the grains of sand as they move against each other. The strange properties of the sand dune have been known about for centuries and have been in the past attributed to desert spirits, or more, perhaps even more fancifully, to the bells of a church buried far beneath the sand. As well as generating noise on its own, the shape of the dune creates a powerful echo that's been used to good effect by choirs gathering in the desert. The laws of nature suggest that when water boils, it evaporates. Boil water for long enough and eventually there will be nothing left but steam. It seems that nobody explained those laws to the boiling lake of Delices in Dominica, which boils for all eternity without ever running dry. You'll find the lake high up Watt Mountain in Morne-Trois, Pitons National Park. The name Boiling Lake isn't an exaggeration. If you touch the water, you can expect to receive serious burns. The water swirls and bubbles menacingly as a warning to anybody foolish enough to consider diving into it for a swim. The bottom of the lake is made from a rocky clay, but below that clay is a vent that runs deep, going all the way through the mountains and below the crust of the earth, allowing hot gases to escape and maintain the boiling temperature forever. It's only the lack of wind that prevents the water from escaping. Once it's become steam, it evaporates, then falls back into the lake, topping up the water level until it boils all over again. You'd have to have a fairly unique set of interests if you wanted to find the largest collection of witchcraft-related objects in the world, but if you do, you'll find them in England, where the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in the town of Boscastle has been doing a roaring trade for many years. It isn't much talked about now, but belief in witchcraft persisted in England for many years after it stopped in the United States of America. As recently as the time of the Second World War, a man named Cecil Williamson served as the British government's advisor on the occult. It was he who opened the museum, but its current location is its third. The first 2 museums were burned down by angry locals. For many years, the most prominent exhibit at the museum was the skeleton of a woman named Joan White. She was believed to have been a witch during her lifetime. The skeleton was eventually buried in 1999, but there are still several more skulls inside the museum's walls, along with spell books, cursed objects, potions, and a book that claims to be a guide to the dark art of shapeshifting. Moving from England to the opposite side of the world in Australia, we find the William Rickets Sanctuary in Mount Dandenong. While it may be called a sanctuary, it should more accurately be described as an assembly of mystical statues created as a tribute to the country's Aboriginal heritage. The name comes from the sanctuary's founder, William Rickets, who was born in 1898 and developed a keen interest in sculpture during his teenage years. A somewhat reclusive and eccentric man, He bought the 4-acre plot that would become his sanctuary during the 1930s and effectively sealed himself off from the world. Over the course of the next 30 years, he added sculpture after sculpture to his land, to the point where hundreds now exist today. Rickets lived to a ripe old age, eventually passing away in 1993 and leaving his land to the local government. They've opened the sanctuary to the public as both a museum and a celebration of William's long life. He always believed his work represented a connection between humanity and nature, and that's how visitors are invited to regard it. The fact that there are bunkers in Albania isn't really a mystery. Europe is covered in bunkers, many of which are the scars of the Second World War. The mystery is how and why Albania, a country that has never been among the continent's richest, ordered and paid for so many bunkers to be built when it never had an obvious use for the majority of them. Staggeringly, there are 750,000 bunkers all over the land, built under the orders of a fanatical communist dictator, Enver Hoxha, a man who believed in pure communism so strongly that he thought the USSR wasn't communist enough and allied his country directly with China. He started building bunkers in 1941 and was still ordering for them to be built when he passed away in 1985. The isolationist country feared attacks from all sides during Hoxha's rule, and he believed the bunkers would keep the people safe. It's thought that, as a ratio, there's one bunker in Albania for every 4 citizens. The cost of dismantling them all is so high that it doesn't even bear thinking about, so they'll likely remain standing until they all fall down. There's so much mystery surrounding the Bulls of Girona, which are a series of animal statues in El Tiemblo, Spain, that even the most well-educated experts can't agree on a single thing about them. The name itself is a bone of contention. Some people feel that instead of being statues of bulls, they're supposed to resemble pigs. Their origin is debated as well. Many people believe that they were built by the Celtic tribes living in the Iberian Peninsula 1800 years ago. But some scholars insist that they're actually the handiwork of bored Roman soldiers. Bulls are generally expected to have horns, which appears to be a point in favor of those who believe the sculptures to be pigs. But there are holes in the sides of each statue's head that may once have held horn ornaments. Despite their historical value, they were largely ignored until 1468, when King Henry IV of Castile and his sister Isabel signed a peace treaty at this exact location to bring a civil war to an end. The agreement became known as the Treaty of the Bulls of Girona, and these odd works of art have enjoyed protected status ever since. The creator of Giang Kuang in Vientiane, Laos, intended his work to be a beautiful religious monument. That's why its name translates into English as Buddha Park. The religious symbolism is there for all to see, but there are those who gaze upon this work and get a sense of deep unease and horror. Perhaps that's because the massive statue of Shiva is carrying weapons on all 8 of his arms. Although the park looks ancient, it was built in 1958 by a self-professed priest-shaman named Luang Pu Bunla Sulalat. The style of the design is atypical of the area and more closely resembles the Mannerist gardens of Europe that were common in the 1600s. It's possible that Sulalat was well-traveled in his younger years. Aside from the well-armed Shiva, there's also a painfully thin-looking concrete Buddha statue and a pumpkin that for some reason has the head of a demon. As a tourist attraction, it doesn't appeal to everyone, but it's definitely unlike anywhere else on Earth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.